at what point and when did you find out that the board no longer had their confidence in you as manager?
Yesterday evening, at a board meeting, I was asked in the afternoon if I could pop up. So I decided to go up, and I took my coach with me, Lee Dixon. And when I walked into the boardroom, I mentioned to the board, by the way, that on this particular board meeting, there was only 2 members, Tony Keating and Les Nichol were there. Gillian Christian wasn't there, and Paul Jones wasn't there. So I just happened to mention, look, I brought Lee along because I was in a meeting last week, and the fact that Lee and I make all our decisions together, even though he's the coach and I'm the manager, we work as a team. So I didn't see any point in not bringing him. And the response was from one board member was, well, that's a bit disappointing because we wanted to talk to you by yourself. And I said, for what reason? So then the other board member interjected to tell me that they decided to go in a different direction and they no longer required my services.
And when do you think this decision had been made?
I personally believe that this has been coming for a long time because to me there's an agenda of somebody else wanting to be in charge of the team, and regardless of results and position in league tables, sooner or later that was always going to come about.
Now, it's no secret that the Ravens have struggled with some results over recent months, but when we interviewed you ahead of the season, you did say that this was going to be a totally different ball game going into this, and people should manage their expectations.
Well, I think this season, going into this season, I think it's going to be far more difficult than last, and we're going to be playing a number of quality teams. You've got to remember that a lot of these teams that we're playing, a lot of the players are on contract, so they're virtually all getting paid to play football, where our players, we're still giving up our time because through the love of the game. But the higher you go, the more intense it's going to be, the more organised other teams are going to be. So we're going to have to really play, really tune in and try and improve as much as we possibly can.
Has the club's expectations been way in excess of where they should be, perhaps?
I think the club probably underestimated how tough that the league was going to be with the positions that their desire was to finish second or minimum top 5. And based on the theory of the previous last 10-year champions, that they gave me a scale of goals per game and goals against. And unfortunately, from where we've come from, it's just a little bit unrealistic to expect those margins for me to achieve, especially having lost 18 of our senior players for a number of weeks. We lost our top striker from day one, top scorer in the league last year, and he played 25-30 minutes or whatever it was, and we've not had him since. And to be fair, we've struggled at times to score goals. Because it's not that we've struggled to score goals, it's the fact that we're playing against better defences, we're defending against better attacks. I would not cast a stone at any of the players because they give 100%. They're all fully dedicated to what they're trying to achieve, and it's just unfortunate that these estimations were a little bit over the top or completely misguided.
Can we just come back to the squad, because you mentioned there, you just touched on it, that you had a number of your key members of the squad were unavailable for this first part of the season. Why was that?
Mainly through injury. And then also the honeymoon period's over and the companies aren't necessarily as generous with the time as they were last year. So it does make things difficult because you can't always travel. Some people just can't travel. And then it makes it difficult because you can't just pick them because they're at a home game. So you have to try and find a balance. And through all the trials and tribulations and hardships that we've had this year, a number of young players, which we had to bring into the squad very, very late, have done really well. And they will improve. I wanted to bring 10 players in at the start of the season, but I was told a firm no because we were going to start an academy. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, the academy didn't start, but those 10 players could have had 2.5 months of training with the senior players and been further down the road than they are today. So that's a little bit disappointing for me that we couldn't bring them in earlier.
So how much of a struggle was it to put together teams for the games that you've played so far?
Well, for
Did
instance,
you find it
no,
difficult?
for instance, one Tuesday game, we had to rally 3 players the same day we were travelling. It even got to the extent that we were looking to try and borrow players from Wigan Athletic to be able to fulfil this fixture. We were in dire straits because of the restraints that had been put on us by the fact that the club only wanted a squad of 30, which again is misguided when you used over 40 players last year. You're playing more games this year at a more intense level, so it makes pretty much common sense to me. You're going to need a lot more than 40 players this year, which has probably already been proven.
And had you flagged up these concerns with the directors of the club?
Flagged up, I don't think it was necessarily needed to be flagged up, but there's always a problem when you go back into the Manx League and you're taking the next player and the next player. And I understand the concerns of the clubs that these players are coming from. It's difficult for them to maintain what they're trying to achieve if we just keep dipping our toe in the water as and when we need to. But unfortunately, the league that we're in and the football and the level that you're playing at, that's what's actually required. And I'll just give you a little insight to that. When we lost to Northwich Victoria 3-1 on Saturday, their reporter was trying to write up the game and he wanted to know the name of their 2 centre-halves. So he asked the left-back for the names of the 2 centre-halves, and the left-back response was, "I don't know their names." Laugh out loud. They've just come in and they're playing for us today. And the issue that we have is that when these players come in, they're generally coming in from level 3, 4 and 5, where we continually are dipping back into level 7. And we can only ask the best of the players, to try their best. And in my opinion, that's what they try to do. We don't always get everything right. Nobody's ever going to get everything right all the time. But you can guarantee that the players do try their best.
In terms of future games, and I'm talking about the near future now, some of those key squad members, I understand, will be coming back into availability to play. How do you think that's going to affect the results over the next few weeks and months?
I think it's very opportunistic to dispense of me now, knowing that the senior players are coming back for selection, knowing that there's going to be a run of games that potentially we could win or do well in. I think the timing of what's been done to me is also very important for the guy that's taken over, and realistically we should do reasonably well. And if he is to work to his ethos on the fact that we should score so many goals and not concede so many goals in certain games, then he should also work on that basis, because that's the basis they set out for me. And just because you're a temp, you can't get away from the fact that because you actually wrote that. I didn't write it, he wrote it. So he now has to deliver on that basis of his own ethos. So for him to be in charge, it's not going to be easy. Everybody's entitled to opinion, and I'm never one for holding grudges. And I feel that just because I'm there, or sorry, I'm not there, or whoever is in charge of that football team, the players should always give their best, 100%. They should run through walls, not for the manager, but for themselves and the community. That's what we thrive on. We thrive on getting people through the gate. So it doesn't matter who's in charge of the team. It's important that the community back the team. And the only way they're going to do that is by the players responding likewise. And for me, the football club has to survive. Whatever they do, they must make this club survive, because there's hundreds of kids down there every week. They all want to play for that team. And I wouldn't like to rob them of that opportunity. So it's important that the players that go on the pitch for Paul or whoever's in charge, everybody always gives their best.
I just want to go back a bit, if I can, and talk about the background on how you first got the job and maybe what your expectations were. Because, of course, the first full season, you led them to that sensational promotion. But how were you appointed, and what were your expectations when you took the role?
I was very grateful to be asked. I was appointed by the director of football, and at the time I was in a meeting with Lee Dixon and Paul Jones, who's the director of football. And from the outset, Paul really wanted to manage the team. That was he's created this team, and he wanted to manage this team. But whether he was ready to take the job at that point, because of whatever reasons he has, he chose not to take it. So he chose me. So for me to actually be offered the job, it's a no-brainer. It's a new level that you're going into, and it's phenomenal amount of time and energy and expenditure for literally nothing. You're doing all this just for the love of the game, where the teams that you're playing, they're all paid. Some players are on £700 a game at our level. So that tells you the quality that you're up against. So on the first season, it was phenomenal. Before Christmas, we'd travelled 3,000 miles. And you try travelling 3,000 miles and getting up at 6:30 twice a week in the morning to train, and then catch a plane, and then stay overnight, get up early to catch a boat. You get one night's sleep, and then you're up early to catch another plane. And it was just on and on and on. And we had managed to, sort of like before Christmas, get ourselves into about 7th place. Then, because we'd played most of our games away from home, we actually had a run of home games, and we never lost a game after Christmas. And the excitement and the euphoria that this brought to the community in the Isle of Man has never been seen before at any level in terms of football. So that in itself, you just have to be so proud to be part of that. My family were there every week, and it's just amazing to see all those people, 3,500 people in the bowl, watching a Manx football club play in the pyramid system in England. You couldn't be more proud.
And of course, you did lead them to that promotion.
Yeah.
What were your expectations though when you first? Did you think that in the first season you would gain a promotion?
I thought we had a very good chance of it, in all fairness. I actually thought that we were going to go in at level 7, which would have been a given that we should win the league. But when we went into this league, because of the fatigue and travel and injuries, intensity of the game, along the way you have to adjust your shape, you have to adjust your systems to play to the players that you have available. So you don't necessarily have a plan, but because every game it changes. And one of the most common questions that was always asked of me is, how do you expect these to play today? And my response was, don't ask me that question, because we don't have a clue. We don't have the time to assess them. They change their players from week to week. So they don't even know themselves how they're going to play every week. So for us to know, it's nigh on impossible for us to be able to achieve that.
I mentioned before the interview we did with you ahead of the season starting, and you did say that this was quite a big step up, and some of the teams that you're going to be facing will be, tough teams to crack. Do you think the club as a whole has underestimated the level of competition in this particular league?
Absolutely. They've underestimated by about 25 points, 30 points at least. where we are today, that could be slightly different, because I have said on the radio on a number of occasions, we've had the opportunity to score and not taken the chances, and you will get punished at this level. If you don't take your chances, you will get punished.
There was also that famous interview that Lee Dixon did where he didn't hold back at one of the, I think it was an away game, where he said quite simply, we were just not good enough and this performance isn't good enough. How much would you say, how fair is it for that sort of performance to be pinned on the manager of a club?
Obviously being manager of the team, it's not nice to have to carry that sort of blame, if you like, because at the end of the day, you put the players on the pitch, the players perform to their best ability, the manager performs to his best ability, and if you lose the game, then the answer's simple, isn't it? These teams are technically, in many ways, so much better than what we are. And I go back to the fact that they're used to playing in the pyramid at level 5. Manx Football League's level 7 and lower. So we've already climbing the system. So for us to adapt to where we are now, that could take another 2 or 3 years. And in that time, we would have probably changed the age group of the side, because you need to have a younger side if you want it to be around for when you get to 2 or 3 years. You want it to be around for another 4 or 5 after that. And to do that, you have to have an academy. And I believe that the football club missed the boat when they went to the Manx FA, and basically they should have said, we need an under-10s. And I did mention this to the boardroom, and I think they're probably much aware of it themselves, that they require this under-10s, under-12s, under-14s, under-18s. And I also mentioned to the board they should go back to the Manx FA and suggest that the under-18s play in the Premier League in the Isle of Man for experience. And that game could be done on the free week, say it's Corinthians free week, then they could play Corinthians that week and Russians free week the following week. And the clubs don't necessarily have to put out their best team. It's just important that we have a group of players that are learning under the coaches to progress into the team, which is where you do need a director of football, but you don't necessarily need a director of football to direct one team.
How much would you say the results of recent months have been down to your dismissal, or were you given other reasons for it?
I don't think results were the sole reason. As I go back to and alluded to, there was an agenda for one man's desire to be in charge of the team. But when I asked the question, if it's not results based, then just give me one other reason why I'm, being dispensed with. And it came back was the fact that we hadn't done enough to generate the youth. But by the way, if we revert back to what I said earlier, we'd won a cup the previous season with a team full of kids. I'd asked for 10 junior players at the start of the season and was refused. I was told that the club weren't going to want to pay for the university players to come back, and to try and reduce the squad to an average age of 23, which is currently at 27. But then to find out that that's one of your reasons that you're being dismissed, but you put the walls in front of me. You put those walls there, and I can't take them down. You have to take them down. And eventually they had to take them down on the basis that we had so many injuries. We had nowhere else to go. So then they just said, yes, but you've only got the kids in now by default. It's not default. I asked for those kids in July, and I was told no. And I was told there was going to be an academy which I wouldn't have any involvement with, and they would send the players up which they thought deserved it. It didn't happen. So unfortunately, that particular side of it doesn't stack up.
Would you say you've been set up to fail?
I would say that, yeah, 100%. And I'm going to give you an example of that. A question was put to one of the board members. Had we been top of the league right now, do you feel we'd still be in this same position now having this discussion? The board member's response was, yes, I think we would. So you make of that what you want. If you're top of the league and they still want to have this discussion with you, then there is an agenda to remove you.
As manager, you'll have had many allies in the club. What would you say to them?
I would like to say thank you to the coaching staff. Like Paul O'Brien has been with me for over 20 years. A very special mention to Lee Dixon, who's been very loyal and supportive. And even though I was the manager and he was the coach, we made all these decisions together on how we would coach the players, on how we would select the team. It's been a joint adventure for Lee and myself right the way through. That must be good 15 years with St George's and then currently FC Isle of Man, Ellen Vannin, along with Paul O'Brien again. And Lee has been very, very loyal to me, as I have to him. And whatever the coaches, whatever they decide to do in their futures, that's entirely up to them. But they've been great to me. And I'd also like to thank all the fans. The fans have been amazing. I've never witnessed scenes like we did last year. They're just incredible. I'd like to thank the family, thank my wife in particular, for 39 years married last week, and she's had to put up with football for 39 years. So bless her. She's been a stalwart and always been by my side and supported me very vigorously against any bad comments like mothers do and wives do. So yeah, she's been a bit special.
And what's the future going to be for FC Isle of Man? We've seen huge crowds at home games, which have somewhat dwindled over recent months. There was quite a backlash when they adjusted the pricing. Do you think that the club has deeper issues that need looking into?
I think there's a fair issue. I think the pricing issue is something that needed to be looked at. But the way I see it is, and I always remember this, Albert Goubet used to say, in business it's better to make a little money than none at all. And I know and I understand that we needed to make more money, but my opinion was, if we were going to make £5,000 or £6,000 per game out of 1,000 people, wouldn't you prefer to make £5,000 or £6,000 out of 2,000 people? To have the crowd there supporting you, because the longer they're there, the longer the club's going to be there. You can't price yourself necessarily out the market on 1 year of success and expect everybody to rock up and come back and do exactly what they did last year, when they've made many, many cases for pricing. I don't follow Facebook, but you hear people talk about it, and I would have thought, I did ask the question of the board, and they said, unfortunately, because the prices have set now, they have to remain for the year. But in this economic crisis, if you went to the English FA and said, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to do that because the cost of fuel in the Isle of Man's gone up, the cost of living in the Isle of Man's gone up, and we can't ask our supporters to keep giving us more when they just simply haven't got the money.
Why do you think the numbers have dwindled?
I just think that the romance has gone out of it a little bit for some people. I think there's an awful lot of football on the telly. The World Cup's coming up. That's going to have a big part to play. There could be other reasons. I don't believe it's just down to finance. I think it's down to, if Liverpool are playing at tea time, your crowd's down. If Manchester United are playing at tea time, your crowd's down. If Southampton are playing at tea time, your crowd's up. So there's a lot of fluctuation. And let's not forget the other night, it was firework night as well. So there's a lot of things that come into play. And those things aren't all the club's fault. The club can't stand those things. There are issues that need to be addressed, but how you address them, perhaps then we should ask an economist, somebody that does know about these things, of where do we go with this? How do we get them back in the ground? Can we subsidise them anything? And that's a difficult one, because the costs for even the club to survive will have gone up. But the one thing you can guarantee is the players' dedication to succeed has never waned. Never, ever waned. And I will be forever grateful for having the opportunity to work with those players.
What reaction have you had from the players to your departure?
In all honesty, I think most of them were completely taken by surprise. They didn't see it coming, or some might have. I saw it coming because of one man's agenda to run the team. The way that they've actually gone about that is completely disrespectful to me and my family. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Would you go back to it if the opportunity came again?
No.